Dear colleagues, greetings from Athens. Let me introduce myself. My name is Peggy Karpouzou. I'm an Associate Professor of Theory of Literature at National and Kapodistrian University of Athens. I would like to warmly thank my friend and colleague, Professor Asun Lopez Varela, for inviting me to speak to you today about a topic I really cherish and make a research about it. Our lecture today is about the transition from Anthropocene to Symbiocene, symbiomimicry in fiction, or envisioning sustainable and resilient cities as ecosystems. During the Anthropocene, the era in which humankind has become a global geological force, the increasing human dominance and effect on Earth systems aggravated climate change and environmental degradation, disturbing biochemical cycles, disrupting water cycles, halting biodiversity, and even leading to species extinction. This precarious state of the environment, but also the precarious lives that humans lead in the event of ecological disaster, are described by Pramod Nayar as eco-precarity. By recognizing the vulnerability of all life forms, their attendant ecosystems, and the relationship between and across life forms and species, eco-precarity is a concept beyond anthropocentrism. It raises awareness about the urgent need for environmental sustainability and the building of sustainable and resilient communities. As the Anthropocene requires a new take on this issue, which focuses not only on human populations, but on questions of coexistence and symbiosis with non-human species, the advent of a new era, the Symbiocene, might reintegrate the humans psychologically and technologically into nature and natural systems, and encapsulate the mutual beneficial relationships between different life forms. The Symbiocene, as an opposite to the Anthropocene, will be characterized by human intelligence and praxis that replicate the symbiotic and mutually reinforcing life reproducing forms and processes found in living systems. These processes facilitate the distribution of resources so that all symbiotes, and when we're talking about symbiotes, we mean all the part of the symbiosis, and among them the young, the weak, and the vulnerable, get their fair share to achieve a better chance for the total life-sustaining ecosystems. Characteristic examples of symbiosis in practice are the Wood Wide Web, an underground network of roots, bacteria, and fungi, helping to interconnect plants and trees and to transfer nutrients. And another quite famous example is the coral reef ecosystems, which have the highest biodiversity of any kind of marine ecosystem. Natural science have developed the study of symbiosis to access various relationships among life forms. The concept of symbiosis has its roots in the Greek verb symbiono, which means live in close connection. It describes an association between different organisms attached to each other and living together, ideally referring to mutual and beneficial living. Albert Bernard Frank first coined the term symbiotismus in 1877 to describe the mutualistic relationship among lichens. However, symbiosis can take different forms, obligatory or facultative. It can be mutualism, where all agents benefit, commensalism, one organism benefits and others continue to live unharmed, and parasitism, one benefits and the other one, who is the host, is harmed. For instance, the majority of human societies are stated to be in a relations of non-mutual symbiosis or parasitic relationship with our planet Earth. Symbiosis has a growing recognition as a core principle of contemporary biology, replacing an essentialist conception of individuality. However, despite the appreciation and use of symbiosis in natural sciences and philosophy, the concept lacks further and in detail approaches to what it is and how it works today. A way to understand the concept of symbiosis and its role in life's evolution on Earth is to proceed through the various embedded assemblages, systems, and collaborative networks. The relationship is studied in the Gaia hypothesis, the idea that the Gaia, a Greek name for Mother Earth, is a living entity and life can be seen as a collaborative process. The Gaia forms a physiological self-regulating system where different agencies and life forms interact effectively to sustain the biosphere. It is all the part of Earth that make up the living world and its evolution through time. Moreover, it is claimed that the planetary Gaian system functions as interrelated dynamic life processes and as an open thermodynamic system where energy flow across gradients and generates organization and order. The Gaia hypothesis postulates that the conditions on the planet are kept within boundaries favorable to life by self-regulating feedback mechanisms involving organisms tightly coupled to their environment. The conception of post-humanist symbiotic citizenship constituted on symbiosis among human and more than human world would entail questions about the nature of this citizenship and the involved acts, practices, and ethics. Closely connected with the idea of political agency, citizenship is generally understood as a legal status with associated rights and duties of those who are full members of a community. Here we are rather interested in lived citizenship, it is the embodied, relational and lived experiences of being a citizen in everyday life in city regions chosen as a particular special context for civic life. Although it seems that there is a wide methodological background, citizenship practical implications are still in progress, as well as the current reinvention of urban space. Setting a framework for environmental and post-human civil studies involves rethinking human agency and habitats. Contemporary urban planning about smart, digital, or algorithmic cities and green or eco-cities finds a match with science fiction speculations about the complexities of living in future cities, often presented as techno-utopias or dystopias and eco-utopias. Our research about an alternative symbiotic urban citizenship is motivated by the assumption that all urban planning, which is driven by historical political, sociocultural, and economic interests and occurs through both discourse and practice, is intrinsically ideological and usually represents dominant ideologies. Given the fact that an estimated 70% of the world's population will live in cities by the year 2050, it only makes sense that the discourses about the rapid urbanization in urban policy and planning are seeking sustainable solutions involving smart cities, green cities, and their coexistence. However, the definition and concepts are still emerging, and there is currently no clear and consistent definition for a smart city or a green city, as they are related to the contextual mindset of the respective communities of scholars. Both are ideological constructs as well as a set of actual practices. For instance, current discourses about smart cities often involve broader theoretical frameworks such as technological utopianism, neoliberalism, security and surveillance, and digital citizenship. The British Standards Institute defines smart cities as the effective integration of physical, digital, and human systems in the built environments to deliver a sustainable, prosperous, and inclusive future for the citizens. According to Francesco Gonella, the element that seems to be shared by all of the various approaches to city smartness is the application of information and communication technologies to basic infrastructural services such as administration, healthcare, public transportation, education, etc. In smart cities, citizens are supposed to live in a bidirectional relationship with the various autonomous systems that characterize a smart city as a complex ecosystem of people, processes, policies, technology, and other enablers who work together within multiple layers to provide various outcomes. Nonetheless, substantial problems in the implementation of smart cities have already been identified in practice. Smart city citizens are plugged into digital information devices to supply information for the city's operating systems. They are connected as passive mass users while the data control center determines what to do with the information. Hence, the smart city is perceived by critical thinkers as a top-down, master-planned vision shaped around the needs of suppliers rather than the needs of the citizens. Inextricably linked to the neoliberal project. In this sense, these smart cities have the potential to undermine true democratic practice or participation and are not sustainable or socially just. In response to this technocentric smart city, the current urban planning research is versed towards an experimental, citizen-centric city, a transition from controlled data mining to open access and user-centered systems in which the smart use of information can increase transparency, participation, and collaboration. This raises the question of how we can create more open, democratic, self-regulated, participatory, and green socio-technical urban systems. A step further in this direction is to explore a symbiotic citizenship between the human and the more than human world in the urban environment. The smart narrative of the city as an urban ecosystem, smart biocities. The city has a long history as an object of representation. As contemporary cities are central to how the Anthropocene is developing, the city has frequently represented the worst excesses of human habitation of the natural environment. Therefore, it's often a topos of apocalyptic visions in modernist and postmodernist literature. On the other hand, cities could represent a much better hope for the future than other configurations of human habitation by the fact that the assemblage of people and resources could lead to more efficiency. Cities are conceived as evolving assemblages of intertwined cultural, material, ecological, and technological elements mediated through relationships and networks operating at multiple scales. These multiple scales are often depicted with the biocentric term of urban metabolism as a model that describes and quantifies the main flows, example materials and energy, that enter in the city to be used or stored and then exit from it. In other words, urban metabolism designates the sum total of the technical and socioeconomic processes that occur in cities, resulting in growth, production of energy, and elimination of waste. This need to deconstruct the city-nature binary is further expressed in urban ecology, a rapidly expanding interdisciplinary field of study that takes up the idea of understanding urban systems by building on ecological analogies. The research embraces two components: ecology in cities and ecology of cities. The first one raises some questions about urbanization's impact on ecological organisms, while the second one refers to the interactions among ecological and social systems in urban settings in order to understand the patterns of urbanization and ecological processes. Contemporary urban ecology is ultimately concerned with sustainability, both of the environment and those who live in it. To prevent the deconstructive effects of climate change, it seems that the challenge of cities is no longer their digitalization, but how this shift could make them more ecological and human. One possible solution could be to transform cities into an extension of the natural world, transforming them into biocities, conceived here as cities that function more like self-sufficient ecosystems that produce the resources they need to thrive and promote life. Nature has evolved distributed systems where millions of interconnected elements make part of complex ecosystems that foster a more balanced way of life. Ecosystems could replace machines as the philosophical design metaphor and the practical model for architectural design. In that case, the built environment may be seen less as a collection of distinct autonomous buildings and infrastructures, but rather as nodes that became conduits or producers of energy and nutrients, materials, in a complex cyclic system. The study of cities as ecosystems gains to be applied to smart city, where digital technologies could follow the same model to rebuild porous networks, as if these were neural systems that connect people, processes, and things. A paradigm shift, an environment where the digital and the biological merge, could be our urban model for smart biocities, aspiring to be sustainable by providing an example of the most dynamic scenes of symbiosis in which humans are participating as symbiotes. This study explores how fundamental concepts and principles such as agency, ecosystem, symbiosis, citizenship, and democracy shape and are reshaped by the symbiotic smart biocity. The necessity of a dialogue among up-to-date scientific research about smart cities and urban design, critical theory, and representations of urban futures in speculative fiction is acclaimed. The aim is to highlight the role of literature and particularly of speculative fiction in order to visualize the eventually unconceivable projections of urban environments in extreme conditions like climate change and reform scientific data, statistics, or models inaccessible or unclear for a large number of non-experts into embodied stories that impart new knowledge and understanding through the use of metaphor and images. By taking into account the research about how ecosystems are able to be robust, resilient, and capable of adapting to constant change, our approach explores eventual strategies and techniques to overcome these future environmental problems as presented in speculative fiction. More specifically, this research proposes taking ecosystem processes as models for inspiration in determining urban design for resilient and sustainable smart biocities. This is some biomimicry, and exploring the potential for human and non-human citizens, equality and interconnection through symbiocracy and even symbiogenesis. Today, we are going to delve on the first part only. It is the concept of sybiomimicry. The working title of this case study is entitled A Flash Silver Green Stories of the Nature of Cities, 2019. This collection of 57 flash fiction stories from 21st century countries speculates about future cities in an age of ecological change. Organized in 4 sections about water and climate change, biodiversity, technology, and children, the stories offer through the study of cities future new perspectives about the natural world and non-human species. Imagine sustainable and resilient cities in biomimicry. Speculation on catastrophe and how we imagine the material cities unfolding in the future is a valuable heuristic tool. It offers an alternative vision and carves an opening for different futures. Our interest is focused primarily on the sustainable and the resilient ones. In the selected flash fiction stories, it will be examined how future urban environments could successfully address the impacts of the interlinked issues of climate change and biodiversity loss, as all species, human and non-human, will feel the ensuing changes of these major disasters. To build sustainable technospheres in the Symbiocene, we have to rethink and go beyond the principle of biomimicry. Biologist Janine Bayonneau's book Biomimicry, Innovation Inspired by Nature, 1997, popularized biomimicry as a principle in three parts. First one, using nature as measure. It is to evaluate the effectiveness of innovations via ecological standards. Second one, using nature as mentor. In that, using nature as measure. It is to evaluate the effectiveness of innovations via ecological standards. And the third one is using nature as mentor. In that case, biomimicry is seen as a new way to learn from nature and redefine how humans relate to and value nature. One crucial assumption for biomimetic urban design is that by emulating or mimicking natural shapes, structures, and ecosystems, the built environment could adapt to climate change impacts while also responding to ecosystems degradation and biodiversity loss. Furthermore, quantifiable evidence has shown that design based on an understanding of living world would contribute to increasing human psychological well-being. Biomimetic production would eventually contribute to more symbiotic relationships, much more mutualism, and much more cooperation, if it ceased, of course, to be under economic logic. In this direction, Glenn Albrecht's concept of cyberbiomimicry underlines the vital interconnections between nature and humans. In addition to mimicking the forms of life, we replicate the life processes, organic processes, that make strong and healthy the mutual beneficial association of shared life between and within different life forms. This quotation is from Albert Glenn book, Earth Emotions, New Words for a New World. Symbiomimicry paves then the way for a new understanding of nature as a metaphor for relationships between humans and non-humans. In this sense, symbiomimicry aligns with the mutual synergy of all life forms to overcome the vulnerabilities, enhance the nurturing, and promote an affirmative ethics of thriving, of co-thriving. Ecosystems offer a model for communities rebuilding and the possibility of reconnecting the living systems that embody balance and interconnectedness. Nevertheless, symbiosis does not mean stability. Ecosystems, as a form of symbiotic entanglement of their parts, are not equilibrium or stable state systems. They are in fact in a permanent state of flux. Though through contemplation, comprehension, and analysis of nature, we learn the basic principles that sustain life, and that are interaction, belonging, constant change, uncertainty, and even loss and death. Taking ecosystems and their various cycles as models for symbiomimetic urban design will also impact our knowledge of what it means to be human in nature. A biology-based narrative describes internal city processes as the exchange of matter and energy between living organisms and the environment. One of the principles of ecosystem is that diversity is linked to resilience in a constantly changing system. Claire Stanford's story, entitled Neither Above Nor Below, refers to a latter-day version of Jakarta in Indonesia. This city is adapted to a changed ecology after the rise in sea levels and the soil subsidence due to decades of aquifer depletion. Future Jakarta in 2099 is a city immersed in water but not drowned. Instead, the city is rebuilt on the same level of the water, letting the water in and offering a new model of coexistence between humans and nature. I'm quoting that their city was the only place in the world that lived so close to the water, the only city in the world that had found a way to coexist with the rising tides. In this sense, Jakarta, the only city in the world that has found a way to coexist with the rising tides, is a city that is operated by the constant and natural flows of energy that are symbiotic. Here, the symbiotic citizenship is perceived as Jakarta is a natural habitat, a well-adapted hydrosphere. To him, it is a beautiful and never-ending playground of mangroves and sea hibiscus, long-tailed monkeys and heron. Those who remained adapted rebuilt. They raised their houses on stilts, they grew accustomed to moving about the city on makeshift rafts. They built the platforms that Hassan runs across now. The city is seen as a living organism which resists the past human, the colonial, and the future natural assaults, the tides. It is an example of a resilient city, a space of hope, enabling her meaning Jayakarta, which means a victorious city. A new ethics of respect, trust, and care between humans and animals is illustrated in the story. In another story, entitled NCGCC 2099, written by Chris Rothery, New York, is also conceived as a resilient city on the sea in 2099 after the floods due to climate change. It thrives by adopting some ecological principles as the city of Bio-Philadelphia. The next speaker I'm quoting was the delegate from Bio-Philadelphia. He spoke proudly. We have done what was deemed impossible by our great-grandfathers. We created a new paradigm and turned back annihilation. When we stopped adjusting nature to our patterns and started adjusting ourselves to natural patterns, only then we truly thrived. Part of the resilient nature of living system is that of if one aspect of an ecosystem fails or ceases to exist, for example, a particular function, process, or organism, there are usually other ways to preserve the continuity of the system as a whole. These resilient biocities have adapted to some symbiotic urban architectural patterns, such as the roofs turned to habitat for seals. I'm quoting, at sea level, the roofs of smaller buildings sticking occasionally out from the surface created habitat for seals. The symbiotic living among humans and more than humans in this flooded New York is evident as the city is sustained by algae, which colonize urban habitats and reveal great biodiversity. Algae are an essential part of a healthy marine ecosystem because they capture and use energy from sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water to produce organic compounds. Similarly, biocities can promote a type of bioeconomy that integrates environmental resources to produce, for instance, biofuels, ecological food, bioplastics, carbon fibers, or construction materials. The narration about algae food, algae fuel, etc., explains that the city's smart computational tools are customized to direct the integration of any biological organism like algae. I'm quoting, the algae trade is the key. You got algae fuel, algae plastic, food, medicine, sewage treatment. Suddenly the canals opened up to a great expanse of water, central marine reserve. Great fun for sailing, diving, you name it, but it's really all about protecting our fish stock. Here, the water is a symbiote conceived as a sort of battery or energy circuit capturing and recirculating external flows of energy, symbiotically connected with the human welfare and daily life in many of its sectors, such as food production, consumerism, medicine, energy, waste, etc. The streams follow the city's flows in the regeneration of the latter. In stories such as John Bristol's poetic reflection about urban interspecies relationships entitled From Eaves to Footfall, the lines between human and non-human, city and nature blur to the point where one is frequently difficult to distinguish from the other. Human citizens follow natural patterns. They mimic ecosystem functions, provision of water, purification, waste used as a resource, etc., adopting symbiomimicry design for the urban space and life. Our ecozone and waste biodiormation infrastructures, wholly unsettlings, we call them, are sustained by labyrinths of streamlets and cultivated small water bodies, their designs informed by careful studies of beaver and muskrat dam and channel construction. Here are some pictures of an architect, famous French architect, Vincent Callebaut, how he's envisioning Paris at 2050, immersed with water, symbiotically represented with nature. Anthropocene cities are rather heavy consumers and polluters, while human habitats are also seen as permanent structures being part of a global system of capital that gives them value as property. A whole other set of values is to be explored if cities and habitats are to adapt to a symbiotic more than human environment, embracing becoming. The concept of Deleuze, I'm referring, of course, as the core condition of relational being rather than being as dualing. In Theo Leothy's story, entitled The Party Man, are represented the miniature cities or the micro cities, which manage humans and resources intelligently as the current smart cities. Micro cities are also biocities as they emulate a number of ecosystems principles, as the one indicating that ecosystems are self-organizing, decentralized, and distributed. Moreover, these microcities are conceived as embedded niche ecosystems that have life cycles. The intelligent systems usually dictated when a city's life cycle came to an end. In order to preserve the balance of the global planetary ecosystem. That's where the first, I'm quoting from the story, that's where the first micro cities came from. The tech was there already. You could put up a miniature city in a few weeks. Automated systems constructed easily built homes, roads. Global water networks were rerouted and purifying plants were deployed. Vertical farms were brought in by the floor and put together into towering skyscrapers. Energy was easy, internet was easy, and people, they were the easier things of all. We've all got a little nomad in us. The story implies a nomadic conception of both citizen and cities, as microcities are thought to be a temporary structure having a life cycle, and when it comes to an end, it has to be repacked and transferred elsewhere. For instance, the microcities are designed to follow ecosystem processes and functions, such as purifying the water or producing renewable energy. By using purifying plants or vertical farms, as referred, the respect principles are the following ones: that part of ecosystems and organisms are often multifunctional, or that ecosystems and organisms within them optimize the whole system rather than maximize components. Moreover, they emulate the basic principles that ecosystems are capable of adapting to constant change, and they use cyclic processes in the utilization of materials. This explains the narrator's comments about the microcities that when they were packed up and gone, well, nature should see a positive return on its investment in the human species. These imaginary microcities, emulating in their conception a planetary scale, could be described as cities that think like planets. In sum, a more than human, smart biocity, wholly connected to and in its environment, can be envisioned as built from locally and sustainably resourced materials, saving, circulating, or even producing energy. As a temporary structure, it could be open to change, even decay, or transport to another place if the environmental conditions require it. Finally, let's envision biodiversity and multi-species citizenship in these biocities. Citizen science fiction stresses upon the problematic construction of citizenship as totalitarian in nature. Moreover, Dalian Areya claims that there remains a paucity of literature on smart cities that explores issues associated with democratic agency and governance. The development of sustainable and resilient communities based on new symbiotic values and practices could avoid the dangers of technocratic regimes overthrowing democracy through an increased degree of surveillance and control on citizenship. The future smart biocity should also take into account the fictional warnings about the effects of condensed, vertical, and oppressive urban environments characterized by increased social inequality and profound alienation from nature. A political rule that regulates the mutual beneficial relationship between all life forms with equality and social justice would be better described by Albert's concept of symbiography. It represents the process of symbiosis in all of our deliberations on human affairs as the creations of a system of governance that reflects the way life works. That will be a major task in the transition away from anthropocentrism. Symbiocracy is illustrated in Amanda White's story entitled Listen, where all the voices participated in the decision making. Smart information and communication technologies in the form of biotranslators allow plants and ants, wolves and worms to make their voices heard in meetings where state leaders discuss the city's future. Shu was knee-deep in mutual pool, talking through biotranslators to the bivalves and mangrove propagules, understanding the requirements for a new microclimate. The symbiosis of the human Shu and more than human world describes a shared living in a truly symbiotic citizenship to achieve a sustainable common habitat and new microclimate. From the perspective of Bruno Latour actor network theory, any inhabitant, whether human or non-human, is an agent and has an influence on the smart biocity's metabolism. Hence, all are equally considered sources of data and play a role in the city's infrastructure. From the flow of water through a storm drain to the individual or collective transportation habits, different measures thus combine to provide a means to develop more efficient cities, services, and infrastructure. One step further, the human in this smart biocity benefit from information and communication technologies to give voice to all the agents aiming to perceive urban challenges and enhance democratic debates about the kind of city they want. In this sense, symbiotic citizens through biotranslators became sensing nodes. Deep communication enhanced biomimicry to biolearning, a process that starts with observation and research from the part of humans to figure out the functions or processes that are life-preserving and learn how to live in synergy with the fellow species. The symbiotic citizenships tie different life forms to biocooperate, forming communities that function as ecological systems. I'm quoting from the story. Today, I want to talk to you about the future of communities, of small communities that can live without taking too much from the planet, of communities that function as ecological systems, communities that can exchange what they need with each other and our fellow species as we learn more about how to live in synergy with our plant and animal friends, which, as you know, is my passion. But to make this happen, we need to show our fellow species that we are committed to living differently. So, all these flash fiction stories that enact symbiosis with more than human world imply that we need a transformation of urban ethos, cultivating responsibility, respect, trust, solidarity, sense of justice, and equality. Eco-precarity, seen as the vulnerability of all life forms, accentuates the need for a more symbiotic relationship with the biosphere and the technosphere as we plan current and future cities and habitats. The concept of smart biocity, a term used to embrace a thoroughly hybrid city to come, acknowledging the interplay of human and more than human agencies and providing habitat for humans, non-human, hybrids and their evolving assemblages, opens a potential common ground for urban planning discourses, posthumanism, environmental humanities, and speculative fiction. The proposed exploration of symbiomimicry, symbiogenesis, and symbiocracy in relation with the smart biocities recast who and what counts as a citizen and track how citizenship is articulated symbiotically via communities and urban practices rather than governable policies. In this sense, symbiotic citizenship could be practically understood as a procreation of place, originating self in a more than human citizen's world. In conclusion, I suggest that the current scientific research about sustainable, resilient, livable, and democratic smart cities and eco-cities might be advanced through the dialogue with critical theory and speculative fiction. It even might become more inventive in modeling our symbiotic planetary futures. Thank you all for listening to me.